great silver halls of Earth's Global Defense Council were silent as Commander Elias Rayner stood before the diplomatic court, surrounded by towering alien envoys in long robes and sharp gazes that shimmered like cold stars. Outside, millions watched on every screen across Earth and its colonies, hoping to avoid war after the brutal Zarinth standoff near Mars. The Zarinth Empire, an ancient civilization stretching across half the known galaxy, had threatened annihilation when a Terran patrol ship accidentally crossed into their sacred border. What followed was a fragile peace talk, and now this unthinkable treaty. To ensure trust between the two species, a human would marry a Zarinth royal. Elias, a war hero with no family ties and a reputation for stubborn loyalty, had been chosen. He hadn't volunteered. 1 week ago, he'd been commanding ships near Neptune's rings. Now he was being handed over like a political trophy. When the ruling envoy gestured to a holographic contract, his name already etched beside hers, Princess Kyria of House Thalzin, he signed without blinking, though his fingers trembled. Hours later, Elias boarded a Zarinth cruiser, sleek and humming with silent power, and left Earth behind. The stars blurred past as he sat alone, armored more by confusion than resolve. The crew didn't speak to him, not out of disrespect, but detachment. They looked at him like one might study a puzzle no one asked to solve. Upon arrival at Valtoris Prime, capital of the Zarinth Empire, Elias was struck by its crystalline towers that scraped the clouds, glowing blue under twin moons. Beauty couldn't distract from the alien eyes watching his every move. Inside the palace, everything was sharp: angles, voices, customs. At the ceremonial chamber, he saw her Princess Kyria, younger than he expected. She wore a cloak of solar thread silk, face calm, posture regal. Her silver skin shimmered faintly under the lights, and her violet eyes seemed to see straight through him. She didn't smile, didn't bow, only stepped forward as protocol dictated. The priest spoke in their language, which Elias understood just enough to catch the word for bond. And when they placed their palms together over a flickering star flame, the ritual began. He felt a jolt, not pain, but pressure, like a sudden shift in gravity. The ritual wasn't just symbolic, it was genetic. The flame reacted to shared bloodlines, something Elias hadn't been told. Kyria leaned in. Her lips didn't move, but her voice echoed in his mind. "You've just been caught in a trap neither of us agreed to." He pulled back slightly, startled. She gave nothing away. The ceremony ended, and the crowd bowed, not to Elias, but to what he represented: peace, submission, or perhaps something far more dangerous. Later, in the chamber assigned to him, Elias tried to process everything. The marriage was meant to stop a war, but it felt more like a setup. Why him? Why her? Kyria hadn't even looked at him with interest-only quiet warning. He searched through the limited files on the palace.net cord, but there was almost nothing about her. Youngest daughter of the emperor. No recorded public appearances, no military or academic achievements, only vague mentions of isolation by preference. That wasn't normal for Zarinth royalty, who were trained from birth to command fleets or manipulate councils. He remembered her voice in his mind, clear, certain, and fearful. Elias wasn't paranoid by nature, but his instincts had kept him alive through war. Something was wrong. The next day, they were presented as bonded before the Council of Houses, a cold assembly of advisors and royal heirs. Elias noted how many eyes flickered with disappointment, or worse, amusement. No one believed this marriage would last. No one wanted it to. That night, when Kyria finally came to speak with him alone, she didn't waste time. She closed the chamber door, activated a privacy field, and said aloud, "I don't want to be your wife, Commander Rayner. And I know you don't want to be my husband." Elias nodded slowly. "But you warned me. Why?" Kyria looked tired beneath her calm mask. "Because They think I'm disposable. You too. You were chosen because you're useful, but not important. You're not part of their future, and neither am I. Elias frowned. You're a princess. She shook her head. I'm a liability. My blood isn't entirely Zorinth. He blinked. What does that mean? She hesitated, then whispered, my mother was human. It's a secret I was never supposed to know, but I did. And now, someone in this palace wants to make sure I never speak it aloud. Elias stared at her, the room suddenly colder. And me, Kyria, looked him in the eye. They'll say the treaty failed. You'll be killed in an accident. I'll vanish. War will return, and they'll claim they tried peace. Never meant to keep it. Elias felt the weight of her words settle like stone in his chest. The alliance was a lie. The marriage was bait. And now, standing beside this quiet, careful princess, he realized he'd walked into something far more dangerous than a political marriage. He'd stepped into a web of secrets that could reignite the war or end to empires. And somewhere in the palace, someone was already planning their next move. Days passed inside the palace of Altora's prime, but to Elias, they felt like years. The halls were cold, the ceilings too high, and the walls always seemed to be listening. Though he now wore the royal seal of a Zorinth bondmate, he knew he was still an outsider. The servants bowed without warmth, the guards stood too close, and the advisors watched him with sharp, silent judgment. Kyria remained distant, almost like a ghost beside him, as she followed the rituals when others were present, stood next to him at galas and briefings, but never smiled, never laughed, never gave more than a few polite words when they were alone. She wasn't cruel, just locked behind a wall he couldn't see through. Elias tried to ask questions about her life, about her mother, about what she meant that night during the ceremony, but Kyria always gave short answers and changed the subject. It frustrated him, but more than that, it worried him. He had learned to read people on the battlefield, and everything about her screamed danger not from her, but around her. She was walking through a minefield, and he was now walking it with her. One evening, after another dull diplomatic feast, where nobles drank sparkling blue liquids and whispered behind jeweled fans, Elias wandered the palace alone. The guards didn't stop him. His status allowed him freedom, but their eyes followed every step. He turned corners, descended stairs, and moved past golden doors until he found himself in a quiet corridor, dimly lit and strangely silent. No art, no banners, just metal and silence. He should have turned back, but something pulled him forward. At the end of the hallway, he found a sealed door that didn't open at his touch. Curious, he tapped the edge, and to his surprise, a voice spoke softly in Zorinth. Access denied. Genetic match required. He was about to leave when he heard something behind him, footsteps, fast and light. He turned sharply, hand ready at his side, but relaxed when he saw it was Kyria. Still, her expression wasn't commit, was alert, and for the first time, he saw something close to fear in her eyes. What are you doing here? She asked quietly, stepping beside him. Elias answered, I was walking, found this door. The palace is a maze. Kyria looked at the door, then back at him. This area is restricted. No one comes here. Anymore? Then why were you here? He asked. She didn't answer, just placed her hand on the scanner. The door hissed open. She looked over her shoulder. Come inside. But don't speak loudly. Confused but curious, Elias followed her into the room. The lights were low, the walls covered in old screens and cables. Dust settled thick across unused panels. In the center, a glowing console hummed with life. Kyria moved to it and began typing commands with fluid grace. Elias stepped closer, watching her fingers move fast across the surface. What is this place? He whispered. An old relay chamber, she said softly. Before the palace was rebuilt, This was part of the original structure, back when the Empire first contacted other species. The Zaranth buried most of it when they upgraded. But this chamber still works. For what? He asked. Kyria didn't look at him. Messages, hidden ones. A moment later, a flicker appeared on one of the dusty screens. A voice, faint and distant, speaking in a language Elias hadn't heard in years. It wasn't Zaranth. It was Earth Standard English, old dialect. He leaned in, trying to understand. The message repeated, and this time he caught more. ... Daughter of Terra. Beacon still alive. Find the core. The blood remembers. The screen went dark. Elias turned to Kyria, heart pounding. What is this? She didn't meet his eyes. Proof that humans came here long before the Empire admits. That someone, maybe many, knew Earth wasn't a new discovery, but a forgotten one. And that it'd be the link they tried to erase. Elias felt like the floor shifted beneath him. You think humans were here before the Zaranth? Kyria nodded. Not just here. Across their empire. Hidden, erased. My mother found fragments before she disappeared. She gave me access to this place before they could take it from her. They? Elias asked. Who are they? The council, she said quietly. My siblings. The nobles. They don't all agree, but enough of them would rather destroy the truth than accept it. And what do you want? He asked, voice low. Kyria looked at him at last. I want to survive, and I want the truth to survive too. I don't want to wear a crown built on lies. And I don't want you to die because someone used you as a shield for their secrets. Elias stepped back, mind racing. He had thought this was about politics, or maybe power. Okay, but it was bigger, ancient secrets, bloodlines, and history that had been cut away like it never existed. He thought of Earth, of the soldiers who had died to protect it, of the people who believed peace was real. If the treaty was built on falsehood, how long would it hold? A sudden noise outside broke the tension. A sharp beep, like a sensor trigger. Kyria's head snapped up. Someone's coming. She shut down the console, grabbed his hand, and pulled him through a side door he hadn't noticed before. They moved fast, silent, weaving through maintenance tunnels lit by faint green glows. Elias didn't speak, didn't ask where they were going. He just followed, heart pounding, aware now that this wasn't a palace, it was a trap. They emerged in a quiet courtyard near their official quarters. Kyria let go of his hand and looked up at the stars for a long moment. They won't try anything in public. Not yet. But if we're not careful, Elias nodded slowly, then we won't make it to the next feast. She looked at him, expression unreadable. You still think I'm the one to be afraid of? He shook his head. No, I think you're the only person I can trust here. Kyria gave a faint smile, not full, not bright, but the closest he'd seen yet. Then she turned and walked away, her cloak trailing behind like shadowed starlight. Elias stood in the garden alone, wondering how far the truth went and what it would cost to uncover it. The days that followed felt like walking through a dream where every shadow watched and every word was a possible trap. Elias moved through the palace halls with caution, his face calm, his mind racing. He and Kyria spoke only when they were alone, and even then, they used coded phrases and broken sentences, just in case someone was listening. Elias had been in war zones, had stared down warships and alien beasts. But nothing made his skin crawl like this palace, this place where truth was poison and silence was safety. He had watched Kyria more closely now, noticing the way she nodded slightly at certain guards, avoided certain corners, or paused before opening a door. She was always thinking, always hiding something behind her still expression. She had trusted him, even if only a little, and he couldn't ignore what he had seen in that forgotten chamber, the message in human language. the voice from the past speaking of blood and memory. It haunted him, so he did what he could. Late at night, when no one was watching, Elias began reading through old Zarinth records stored in the guest archives. Most of it was used as ceremonies, royal births, dry treaties, but now and then he found gaps, places where events didn't match, dates missing, a battle that supposedly happened but had no records of ships or losses, cities mentioned once, never again. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to raise questions. Then came the visit. A royal advisor named Valrek requested a private audience with Elias in the garden pavilion, away from the ears of the court. The man was tall, with silver markings across his face and robes that shimmered like smoke. He spoke slowly, each word carefully chosen. He praised Elias's service, admired his strength, spoke of peace and honor. Beneath every word was something else, something darker. "You must understand," Commander Valrek said, with a smile that never reached his eyes. "The people need peace to feel safe. They need symbols. That is what you and the princess are now. Symbols. Nothing more." Elias kept his voice calm. "And if symbols break?" Valrek's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then we make new ones. It's important you remember your place. The past is full of things best left buried." That night, Elias couldn't sleep. He sat by the window of his chamber, looking out at the glowing towers of Valtoris, wondering how much of this empire was built on hidden bones. The next morning, Kyria found him early, her voice low and urgent. "We need to go. I found something." Didn't explain, just led him quickly through the lower levels of the palace. They moved through servant passages, winding staircases, and finally entered an ancient wing sealed off by glass and warning signs. Dust filled the air, and the walls were cracked, but the tech still hummed. Kyria brought him to a long, dark room lined with forgotten machines. She activated a small cube, and a projection appeared this time, clearer than before. A woman with dark hair and tired eyes stared out. Her voice was human, but she wore Zarinth armor. "This is Dr. Lyra Raines, Terran Research Corps. If you're seeing this, then the chain wasn't broken. The genetic beacon is still active. The Empire will deny everything, but the truth is buried in the vault of Serio. The bloodline holds the key. If they find her, they will silence her. Protect the last child of Terra. She is the only link to the storm engine." The recording ended. Elias turned to Kyria, heart pounding. "That was your mother." Kyria nodded once, her face pale. "I found this 2 days ago, but I wasn't sure if it was real. Now I am." "What's the Vault of Serio?" Elias asked. "A myth," she said. Place that supposedly holds old war technology from the time before the Empire. Weapons, too dangerous to be used, so they were sealed away. No one knows where it is, or they pretend not to. Kilas took a breath, trying to keep his voice steady. "And the storm engine?" Kyria shook her head. "I don't know, but it's the reason they fear me. If I'm part of a bloodline tied to ancient Terran weapons, then I'm not just a political problem. I'm a threat." They stood in silence. For a moment, the air thick with the weight of what they had just seen. Then Kyria spoke again. "We have to leave the palace. We need to find a vault before they do. I have a name, contact in the outer systems who might know more. But we can't trust anyone here." Elias agreed, but he knew escape wouldn't be easy. Every corridor had cameras. Every wall had ears, but he had escaped worse places. They began to plan in secret, using Kyria's hidden access in Elias's military training to build a route out. They hid supplies, mapped the tunnels, and waited for a distraction. It came sooner than expected. A palace servant, one of the few who ever spoke kindly to Kyria, was found dead. The official story said illness, but the look in Kyria's eyes said otherwise. "They're getting closer," she said. We have to move soon. The next day, while the court celebrated a festival under the twin moons, Elias and Kyria made their move. Disguised in ceremonial cloaks and moving with the crowd, they slipped into the lower passages and through a hidden exit near the old landing docks. But as they reached the outer wall, alarms began to sound. Someone had betrayed them. Carts poured into the tunnels, and Elias pulled Kyria behind crates, drawing a stolen plasma cutter. We have to run, he said. She nodded, no fear on her face, only resolve. They raced through the shadows, dodging patrols and avoiding scanners, until finally, they reached a small vessel hidden beneath a collapsed section of the Darka ship once used by Kyria's mother, still functional after all these years. As they lifted off, the palace shrank behind them, and Valtoris faded into the dark of space. Kyria sat beside Elias in the cockpit, her eyes on the stars. We have a chance now, she said softly. Elias nodded. Let's find the truth. And as they flew into the unknown, both knew they were no longer running from danger. They were running toward something greater, something ancient, something waiting to be awakened. The stars stretched endlessly ahead as Elias guided the stolen ship through dead space, far from patrol routes and Empire-controlled sectors, while Kyria worked silently beside him, scanning old data maps and decrypting fragments her mother left behind. They didn't speak much, but the silence between them was no longer cold there. Was trust now, thin but real, built from shared danger and quiet understanding. They were heading toward an ancient system called Draelus Verge, a cluster of broken planets orbiting a dying sun, where rumors of the Vault of Seriel had surfaced decades ago, and then were buried just as quickly by the Council. They neared the outer edges. Terrans scrambled their long-range signals, and strange static pulsed through the console like a heartbeat, making the ship tremble every few minutes, as though something enormous slept beneath the dust and was stirring now that they approached. The descent onto the shattered moon, known as Draven Scar, was rough, with violent winds and magnetic storms, but Elias landed them on a plateau surrounded by blackened stone and eerie silence. The sky above, tinted with the red haze that never cleared. Kyria stepped out first, her eyes scanning the ground with a strange certainty, as if something beneath her skin remembered the way. Like a map was etched into her blood, guiding her feet without her knowing. They crossed ancient ruins, covered in dust and vines, and every broken wall seemed to whisper when touched, like the stones themselves remembered pain. Deep inside one of the collapsed towers, they found a sealed doorway with a strange emblem, half Sarinth, half Terranand. When Kyria placed her hand on it, the door lit up, responding not to a code or command, but to her very presence, and then slid open with a sound like distant thunder. Inside was a chamber unlike anything Elias had seen, walls made of metal and bone, a ceiling shaped like an eye, and in the center, a pedestal holding a sphere that shimmered with inner light, floating just above its base, humming with quiet energy. Kyria approached slowly, her hand trembling, and the moment her fingers brushed the surface, a surge of images exploded in her mind, flashes of war. Cities burning, stars collapsing, and then the soft voice of her mother whispering, "TA Storm Engine must never fall into their hands." The sphere dimmed, and Kyria fell to her knees, breathing hard, sweat on her skin despite the cold, and Elias caught her before she collapsed fully, helping her sit while she tried to explain that the Storm Engine was not just a weapon, but a key to rewriting space itself, Terran invention capable of bending time. Used once in the final war and hidden because it nearly destroyed everything. Before they could speak more, an explosion rocked the surface above, sending dust down in thick clouds. Elias cursed as he checked the scanner, multiple signals. Armed and fast Sarinth enforcers, no doubt, sent by Valrek, or one of Kyria's siblings, who had tracked them despite their precautions. There was no time to run, so Elias pulled her up and sealed the chamber from the inside using the old Terran codes Kyria had uncovered. Then helped her move deeper through a hidden passage behind the pedestal, hoping it would lead to another exit. The tunnel was narrow and winding, carved deep into the moon's crust, and as they moved, they could hear the muffled sounds of plasma fire above, then the crash of metal breaking as the enforcers forced their way in. Kyria's breathing grew ragged, and Elias knew the sphere had done something to her, shown her too much, or awakened something ancient inside her mind that hadn't been touched in years. Still, she kept walking, refusing to stop. And soon the tunnel opened into another chamber, this one smaller, filled with floating shards of glass that reflected things not present in the room, like old memories caught in crystal. Kyria stepped into the light, and the shards began to orbit her slowly, showing brief flashes of her childhood, her mother's face, and scenes of war that clearly hadn't happened in her life. To Minto, she raised her hand, and all the shards stopped, pointing in one direction. Elias followed her gaze to a cracked wall behind an old pillar, and together they broke through it, revealing a hangar buried beneath the moon, still powered, still intact, and holding a ship unlike any Elias had ever seen. Sleek, dark, and pulsing with hidden energy, the craft looked alive, like it had been waiting for centuries to be touched again. Kyria walked straight to it and placed the storm engine in a slot near the front, and the ship lit up from within, lights glowing like veins. They boarded it quickly, just as the tunnel behind them shook with the sound of pursuers. And the strange vessel responded to Kyria's presence, like it knew her, lifting from the hangar floor with no command and blasting upward through solid rock in seconds. They broke through the surface just as the Zaranth enforcers fired, but the new ship was faster than anything they had, and within minutes they were gone, stars streaking past as the ship jumped to light speed without even asking. In the silence that followed, Elias looked at Kyria, was pale but calm, her eyes focused on something far beyond the stars. "They'll come after us," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied. "But now we have something they can't ignore. And they know I'm not afraid to use it." Elias studied the ship's controls, noticing how the interface was written in a mix of Terran and something older, something unknown. "What do we do now?" he asked. Kyria looked at him, her voice soft but firm. "Now we break the crown. Not just one, all of them." And as the strange vessel carried them deeper into the dark, they both understood that the fracture had already begun. The lies were cracking, the bloodlines were stirring, and somewhere ahead, the forgotten truths of the galaxy waited to rise again. The ship moved like it had a mind of its own, faster than anything Elias had ever flown. And as the stars stretched into long streaks across the black sky, he could feel a strange hum in his bones, like the vessel was not just flying through space, but tearing through layers of time and memory. Beside him, Kyria sat in the pilot's chair, her hands resting on the console, her eyes closed, as if listening to something only she could hear. The storm engine pulsed faintly in the center of the bridge, its glow shifting in color, reacting to her presence and the path they followed, which wasn't a path at all, but a pull signal buried deep in the ancient codes left by her mother, leading them toward a place hidden outside the known sectors, a dead zone marked on most charts, with warnings, "Do not approach," but they were going straight into it. The closer they came, the more the ship began to change. The walls shimmered like water. Lights flickered in patterns that matched Kyria's heartbeat. And strange voices echoed through the hallways at night, whispering in a language Elias didn't understand, but somehow recognized from his dreams. And they finally dropped out of light speed. The view before them took his breath away. A massive storm in space, swirling like a black hurricane lit from within by flashes of blue lightning, at the center of which floated a dark sphere, an artificial planet. Dead and cold, its surface cracked like old glass. "That's it," Kyria whispered. "That's the heart of the storm." She explained that the Vault of Surreal wasn't just a place. It was a machine. It's built by ancient Terran minds who had discovered how to bend space and time, and then sealed their knowledge away before it could be misused. The vault was buried inside that world, powered by the energy of collapsing stars, waiting for the right bloodline to return. The ship took them straight into the storm, through winds that tore at the fabric of space. And Elias had to hold his breath as the systems flickered and screamed, but they passed through without harm. Guided by the storm engine, which grew brighter the closer they got. They landed inside a broken dome near the center of the sphere, and everything was quiet, too quiet, like the air itself was holding its breath. They stepped out into a city of ruins, buildings shaped like towers of bone, and metal, long-dead machines frozen in place, and deep below, the hum of power that had not stopped in centuries. As they moved, lights flickered on, sensing Kyria's presence, and doors opened before her without a touch. It felt like walking through the ghost of a civilization. At the center of the city, they found a deep shaft leading down into the core of the world where the storm engine was meant to connect to the true vault. But as they prepared to descend, the ship sent out a warning. Multiple ships were approaching, fast. The Zarenth Empire had found them. Elias grabbed his weapon, checked his charge, and looked at Kyria. "We don't have time," he said. She nodded, then placed her hand on a panel near the shaft, and a platform rose silently from below. "Then we make time." Descended together into the heart of the world, the light growing stronger around them. And as they reached the bottom, a massive door stood before them, covered in carving Starin symbols, mixed with others Elias didn't recognize. Kyria stepped forward, the storm engine floating beside her, and the door reacted, slowly grinding open with a sound like thunder. Inside was a chamber of light, and in the center, a second core larger, more complex waiting. The moment Kyria stepped in, the chamber came to life, and a projection appeared. Her mother's face, once again, calm and serious. "Kyria," the voice said, "if you've come this far, then the Empire has not changed. You carry the last of our blood. The vault is yours to command. But know this, power does not forgive. The storm engine can create or destroy. Choose wisely." The message faded, and the vault began to glow, as if asking what she would do. But before she could answer, the ceiling above exploded, and Zarenthan forces dropped in, led by Valrek himself, his eyes burning with anger. "Step away," he ordered, weapon raised. Elias moved between them, gun ready, but Kyria held up a hand. "No," she said quietly. "It ends now." She touched the vault, and in an instant, light poured from it, surrounding her, lifting her off the ground as the storm engine fused into her chest, becoming part of her. The ground shook, and time itself seemed to bend. Elias saw flashes of his past, then futures that had not yet happened. The Zoran soldiers dropped their weapons, frozen in place, unable to move. Valrek screamed, but even he could not fire. Kriya floated back down, her eyes glowing. "The Empire lied," she said. "They killed to keep their power. But I remember now. I remember everything." With a wave of her hand, the weapons melted, the walls sealed, and the vault shut them inside. She turned to Elias. "We can reset it," she said. "We can rebuild the stars, but we'll be hunted forever." He stepped beside her. "Then we fight together." And with that, the vault rose into the sky, the storm around them vanishing, and a new light breaking across the stars, one not of war, but of truth. The heart of the storm had opened. Everything was about to change. The vault rose from the ruined world like a second sun, glowing with ancient power as it drifted through space, wrapped in silence and light. But Kyria knew their time of peace was short. The Empire would not rest, Not after what she had done. Not after she took the storm engine and unlocked the truth buried for generations. Inside the vault, the ship had changed again, its systems now fully merged with the machine. Its walls alive with the shifting light and strange symbols that responded to her thoughts. Elias watched her closely as they floated above a new world. One hidden under the surface of a gas giant called Foros, where old Terran maps had once marked a site with a single word: Sanctuary. Kyria believed that this place held the last Kia network, built by the original Terran rebels who had tried to stop the Empire before it ever began. The vault approached the gas giant. A path opened in the clouds, revealing a strange opening in the storm, like an eye waiting for them. The ship entered slowly, drifting down through thick layers of gas, until they reached a glowing gate made of energy and stone, buried in the clouds, like a secret mouth. It opened with a hum, and the ship slipped inside, revealing a vast underground world beneath the clouds, massive towers of silver and gold stretching out beneath the planet's surface, powered by a core that pulsed like a heart. They had arrived at the hidden city, known only in myth as Salazar. Inside, the city was still alive. Lights flickered on as they moved. Machines hummed softly, and empty walkways lit beneath their steps. Kyria felt something strange in her chest, like the engine was whispering to her, guiding her to the center of it all. They followed long halls that twisted like roots, and slowly they came to a chamber deep underground, where a massive device stood, a sphere larger than a building, surrounded by floating rings of metal and light. This was the source, the final core, built by the Terrans, meant to store knowledge, energy, and something else, memories. Kyria placed her hand on the surface, and the sphere opened, releasing a burst of images so powerful that Elias fell to his knees. She saw the truth of the Empire, how the Zaranth royal line was created by twisting Terran DNA, how the Council had wiped out entire colonies to hide the truth, and how her own mother had sacrificed her place to bury the storm engine before it could be used to erase entire systems. But the source also showed them something terrifying. It showed that the Empire had built a second vault, one beneath the surface of their capital planet, connected to a weapon that could tear through time itself and undo what had already been done. If Valrek reached it first, he could reset the galaxy in the Empire's image forever. Elias looked up at her, his face pale. "We have to stop him now." Kyria nodded, knowing what it meant. They had to go back to the very heart of the Empire, back to the world they had escaped. They left Salazar in silence, the vault rising once again through the storm. And soon they were racing towards Zaranth Prime, cloaked by the source itself, which hid them from scans and sensors. As they neared the planet, they saw warships gathered in orbit, hundreds of them, ready to strike. But the vault slipped past like a ghost, diving into the atmosphere and descending through layers of security until it reached a place that didn't exist on any map. A vast desert wasteland outside the capital, where the sky was always dark. They landed beside a cracked mountain, and beneath it was a door, sealed for centuries. Kyria used the engine to open it, and they stepped into tunnels built by forgotten hands, filled with broken machines and faded lights. The air was thick and warm, as if the earth itself remembered the pain. Deeper inside, they found the second vault, half buried in stone and ash, pulsing with sick light. The weapon inside was already waking, powered by a shard of the engine stolen by the Council long ago. They heard footsteps. Valrek had arrived, stepped from the shadows, surrounded by guards, his face calm and cruel. "It's over," he said. "You've brought the key to me." Kyria stood tall. "You don't understand the engine. You never did. It doesn't follow commands. It follows purpose." Valrek laughed. "Then let's see whose purpose is stronger." He raised his weapon, and the fight began. Elias, moving fast, taking down guards while Kyria faced Valrek at the core. He was strong, trained, and ruthless, but she was connected to something bigger now. The engine responded to her anger, her hope, her memory of her mother's voice. She dodged his blows, reached the weapon core, and placed both hands on it. A burst of light knocked everyone down. The vault screamed, then cracked open, releasing a wave of energy that wiped out the weapon and shut down the underground system in one blinding pulse. Valrek tried to stand, but Elias tackled him, holding him at gunpoint. "It's done," Elias said. "You've lost." Kyria stood slowly, the engine now quiet in her chest. "No more lies," she whispered. "No more empires." They sealed the second vault forever, and as they left the mountain, dawn broke. Across the capital, a real dawn, not one controlled by orbiting mirrors. The empire began to shake from within, the people rising with questions, with truth. The council fell. Cities lit up with protest and change. And across the stars, word spread of the girl who had ended 1,000-year rule, not with war, but with light. Kyria and Elias vanished into the stars once more, flying the vault like a ghost ship, helping systems rebuild, uncovering more lost places, searching for others like them. The storm engine no longer burned, glowed steady and calm. Beneath their feet, old empires cracked and crumbled. Above them, a new story began to rise. And in the silence between stars, the universe, at last, began to remember who it really was.